everybody. Nice to be back with you. I'd like to tell you a story this evening. So it's story time. And as some of us are feeling, it's a little bit hot, so I just walked here. I walked quite a distance, actually. So forgive my perspiration. But it is a good story. It's a very fun story. There was a group of people, a group of about 6 people, who lived here in the Burlington area about, 10, 12 years ago, who decided that they wanted to have a sitting group. They thought it would be nice to have a meditation group in their living room sometime. Should we be recording this, or is that not important? Not important tonight?
Yes, please.
Okay. It's a good story. Might be worth recording. So this group of people wanted to have a sitting group, and so they talked to each other, and they had an email thread going along, and they decided to gather in someone's house and someone's living room, and they thought that each week they would go from living room to living room. And in this first week, they needed somebody or other to teach meditation at their sitting group. And there was a monk who had just come back from Asia, returned to Vermont. And so they had heard about this person, and so one of them asked him if he would join. And that's me, so I joined, and I led the group. And they, at the end of the evening, one of them mentioned that it's hard to keep these sitting groups going. It's difficult to maintain a regularity in meditation at all. Certainly it's hard to bring people together once a week, and so he said that generally sitting groups like this succeed if they have at least one of 2 points consistent. So one point that should be consistent is that there's a place, a location, where they regularly gather every week, and another point was that it's best if there's a regular teacher. And they concluded that there wasn't a clear way to have a regular location because they were going to go from living room to living room. But they could possibly have a regular teacher, and so they said, well, you didn't do too bad of a job, so maybe you could be the teacher every week. And so I said, sure, I can be the teacher every week. I don't have much going on right now. I just got back to Vermont, and I don't have any plans for what's going to happen now that I'm back here. There's no monastery about, so I can't join that. So I'd love to join you every Sunday evening. That would be great. From 5 to 7 perhaps? And I said, yes, 5 to 7. We'll be switching locations, hither and thither. So we did that for a while, and there came a point when there were more people who wanted to join the group than could, let's say, appropriately fit into the living rooms. Appropriately means that nobody wanted their stuff removed. And we were thinking of opening it up to the public. So people were concerned about just anybody coming into their homes, and so we thought, well, maybe we should have some public location where we could do this. And it just so happened that I had moved in to the apartment right over there at this time, and so I suggested that we could use this area, and so we all started to come into here and sit from 5 to 7 on Sunday evenings. You may have heard about it. So we managed to begin that tradition, how long ago? Maybe 8 years ago, and I think it's more or less unbroken since then. I think we've missed a total of how many? Maybe 3 Sundays in that time. And we haven't missed a Sunday for maybe 5 years now. Something like that. Who knows this better than I do? It's been a long time since we've missed a Sunday. So nowadays we have a consistent location. As you can tell, you don't have a consistent teacher anymore. Sorry, but we'll get to that part of the story momentarily. So there we were in here trying to do this and trying to do that. And that community, which is you, kept on supporting a deepening of the practice. And so we started running more intensive programs. And one of the things that we did was develop, let's see, how shall we say, long-term courses. So we taught a number of long-term courses, some of them online, but many of them right here in this building. No one here tonight was in any of those courses, right? Yeah, it's been interesting how everything has shifted over the years, but we had a lot of people go through the courses, and those courses were good. And we also had a schools program, and we were teaching mindfulness in the schools, and I thought it would be a clever idea. I had a brilliant idea to create an organization of people who could help me to teach in schools. And what they would do would be they'd come and they would do marketing for me and advertising and billing and such, and then I could just teach all the time rather than worrying about money. It was a very clever idea. It didn't work out. So we made the Center for Mindful Learning. A whole bunch of us made the Center for Mindful Learning. And we started not only teaching in the schools, but also creating remote courses. And we, that group of people, along with a few others, were sitting regular retreats, typically in the woods. So we were doing one of these retreats at one point, and we finished the retreat and we're coming back here. We were all coming back here. And on the way here, I was in the car with Kaishin, and he said, "You know what?" He said, "You know what? That retreat that we just did, that's really what we should be doing. We need to be doing more of that. We need to be doing that deep practice. And you, while you do a fine job teaching on Sunday evenings and in the schools and such, that isn't really what you were trained to do. You're really trained to run a monastery. And so it's very good to do those things, but you shouldn't do only those things. You should also do something more. So let's start a monastery." And others said similar things. And so we decided to try to start a monastery. And this was, so we incorporated Center for Learning in 2011. This is in 2013, right? Is that true? 2013, we sent word out to the world. We said, "Hello, everybody. We're starting a monastery," which means we need a few people and a lot of money. And a few people came, and a lot of money came. It was amazing. Just incredible. And so we, incredibly enough, started a monastery with 5 people. Yes?
Yep.
With 5 people. And really threw ourselves into it. And I'm looking at Joshin over here, because he was one of the original people who initiated this monastic community. And we were living right here in the apartments up there, doing our best to live in a monastery, to turn this whole place into a monastery. And we found ourselves expanding. And we experimented with many different models of training and many different sorts of courses for the public. And I taught at colleges around here, and Joshin over here made a a good portion of the online course that we offered. And Tashin came and joined us and told us about some philosophy that I don't even remember, sorry. What was it?
Phenomenology.
Phenomenology. Excellent. Well, I was just talking about that yesterday. So thank you for that. Taught us about phenomenology, and we grew and we grew until we couldn't really live here anymore, even though we wanted to, and we had to move, and we didn't want to move. And the main reason we didn't want to move was that we didn't want to leave you. I mean, it's a nice space. It's a nice space, don't get me wrong, and the convenience stores around here are quite convenient, but it was really you. It was really your presence, really your love that held us here and made us so sad to leave. And we really fought to stay. We did everything we could to not leave. We did everything we could to be here, but it didn't work out, and so we had to move away. And we left here, but we committed to stay in touch and to continue Sunday evenings, whatever it took, and we did that, which I'm very proud of. We also invited all of you up to Johnson, which is where we moved to. Moving there, oh, I forgot to tell you the fun part of the story. Yes. So my goal was to make an organization that would raise money and do billing and take care of all that stuff for me. But as it tends to happen, some of you may have tried this yourself, and you may find that actually what happened was I raised money for the organization. I advertised and marketed and billed and took care of the logistics for the organization, and through that process, over a period of years, I learned how to do that. I learned how to do it because you have to learn how to do it. You can't learn how to do it sometime later this week, because it had to be done sometime last week. And so I just had to figure it out. And I and Taishin, another resident, we took over the organization, and we threw ourselves into it, and we made it happen. And when we moved to Johnson, it became even more important that we do that, and that we do that well. And once we were there, we had something, it was sort of like a big mansion, and many of you have been there. And we did our best to turn it into a monastic setting. And did we succeed? Yes? Oh, good. Oh, great. So we succeeded. That's good. Thanks for saying so. I looked around at the people who were living there. None of them nodded. But we did our best to turn it into a monastic setting, and I'm glad that it was to your satisfaction. So we did a pretty good job, though. We did live in a monastic way, and we did continue to come here and retain our relationships, and even grow new ones. And in fact, the community here grew, and at this point it's a community of, I don't know, a few hundred people. I don't know how many people we have here, about 40 or 50 people, and I'd say if you calculated over a whole year of how many people come to our programs in the Burlington area, it's a few hundred. So that's really exciting, starting from 6. But that location just wasn't enough, wasn't good enough. It wasn't to our satisfaction. And it also wasn't, fully legal for us to be there.
Had issues.
Had issues. So, due to some unfortunate decisions made not by us, we had to leave. And so we looked around, and we looked here and we looked there, and there were a number of places that would have been wonderful if it had been possible to afford them, but we eventually, but we had to give up on those, and eventually we found another place which we have been very happy and very comfortable in, and have in fact turned it finally into a real monastic academy. And that real monastic academy is in Lowell, and again, many of you have been there. And it took a few years of work before well, I don't know if we're quite there yet, but we're almost there now. We're pretty much there. Peter has taken over, and I've become almost obsolete, which is a big moment. Almost. We're not there maybe, but almost. We're on our way to the point where I can, head out, and the organization continues. So head out in whatever way that means, I'm going on a bike trip over the next few months, and if I get hit by a truck or something, perhaps the organization will continue without me. So that's exciting, and this is the first time that seems possible, even if it still doesn't quite seem probable. So we still have work to do there, but it's very exciting. And right around that same time, someone else, Joshin, had the vision, the inspiration, the determination to go to California and create the next location of these monastic academies. And so in the Bay Area, in the tech capital of the world, he founded the next location, this next community. And that was, when did you leave? A year and...
Just about a year and 18 days.
Okay, a little over a year ago. Very good. Just about a year and 18 days ago, Joshin went out and started this. So we find them in the same sort of position right now. It's clunky, it's changing all the time. The challenge and the most important thing is creating a community of people who we really connect with, who we hope to maintain lifelong relationships with. And of course, the challenges of raising money and managing people and holding a vision. So, so he's doing that. And it's been a lot of hard work. And I'd like you to ask yourselves before, to ask yourselves and answer this yourselves before I answer this question. Was it worth it? Was it worth it? All this hard work. We put in a lot of hard work. Was it worth it? And if so, why? What have we achieved? What have we given to the world? What have we accomplished? What good have we done?
You planted a seed
Mm-hmm. A seed, what sort?
to grow.
To
For
grow.
social change.
For social change, very good. So to have an impact on our society. Mm-hmm. That's right.
Are you sort of putting out the question to us? Like, was the Monastic Academy worth it as a project? Or?
It was a big story, right?
Right.
It started with 6 people in the living room,
Mm-hmm.
and it ended with us here now, right?
Yeah.
So was it worth it? And if so, why?
I would say, that seems very subjective because was it worth it? Because for me, I value the product of it a lot. So for me, it's totally worth it for you to have done that. But that's also a little bit unfair of me in some ways to say it was worth it because it was your, and other people's dedication to it that brought it there.
I'm with him, yeah.
I'll second that.
It's worth it for me to see the blossoming of human beings into their best selves.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's worth it for me.
Mhm.
I mean, I get a certain amount out of it that I bolster with a whole lot of other things because this is just Sunday night for me, except the times I get to go out, except the times people are staying in our house and we get to
Mhm.
enjoy all their what they have to offer us, which is a lot. But it's the watching, you know, in this world where you see so much destructive kind of things, it's like you said, it's like watching things grow that you know are going to be really super valuable to the world. And for that, there's nothing else more important than that to me.
It's very hopeful.
It teaches me faith.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing the small group from not the beginning, but and then seeing the room fill up and change and just you're holding, you said holding the vision.
Gives you faith.
Helps me hold the vision.
Mm-hmm.
And I have that in others.
So you have faith, you have a vision, and that's what it is given you.
It's given me increased faith in my own vision. As well.
I think every time that I go to the center, I'm just overwhelmed by seeing new people that I've never met before and being able to very quickly experience intimacy and connection with them that I couldn't possibly experience with somebody that I met on the street or somebody that I met through work. It's a setting that builds community and closeness in a way that we don't know how to do as a society.
I've been lately feeling really disappointed in our community.
So,
Well, I really love everyone.
Is this answering the question?
I'm doing my very best right now.
Are you saying that it is or isn't worth it?
I think it must be worth it to have a space where I could tell everyone how disappointed I am feeling.
What if you don't follow the vision?
Is this answering the question?
Yes.
Mhm.
If you don't follow your vision,
Mm-hmm.
is that an appropriate choice? What have you not learned? What have you what challenge have you avoided? I also have a vision and a challenge that I meet with
Mhm.
great difficulty at this moment, and there's always the suggestion of abandonment.
Mhm.
And so every step of the way, from the beginning, and so is this worth it? I mean, it's of course we would say, yes, it's worth it. But it's every moment. I mean, you get married, is this worth it? You know, you make a commitment, but you have to make that commitment every day. And the monastery, you know, because also you have to make a commitment to principles and to the essence of the vision, and that it doesn't falter from that. And that is, so that it exists. Oh, we could get into a big hoopla, a celebration of, oh yes, this is so valuable, but is that worth it? To get involved in that? Maybe there's something more important to see what is learned. What did you learn from all of that story that then takes you to the next step? Seems like a more important question.
Yeah, I think it's worth it in that asking the same question of a startup company, pick your kind of company, but you have people with the best intentions, hopefully, who are all working, learning to work together with a common goal, certainly the personal growth and the things one learns in starting a company, starting a monastery. You know, again, if the end goal, even if it's elusive, is contributes positively to the world, and even if you find you're a long ways from it, or it remains elusive, I don't see how X number of people that you add up, all working together with the best intentions for its outcome, for the end product, could possibly not be worth it. I mean, if the whole thing crashes and burns, it's not like you've wasted 8 years. I mean, all the people passing through over the past 8 years have more than likely grown significantly in that, even including myself showing up for 8 years at Sunday Sits and a hard summer lesson. But no, I mean, the point being is that, like any startup, there's no guarantee it's going to ultimately be worth it, as in, you know, change the world. But in trying to, with best intentions, getting from ground zero to the point where it succeeds, fails, stays static, it's already been worth it in all the people who have been positively affected, and far more positively affected in this case than most company startups.
It has a life of its own. Who said that that vision was your vision? You know? Popped into someone's head doesn't mean it came from you. You know? It has a life of its own. A child comes from me, but it's not mine.
The thing that I find special about this space is that I've been in a lot of meditation groups, and I've sat in front of a lot of gurus of different sorts in different places I've been, and what's unique for me about the message that I hear, and there's a lot of things that are unique here, and it's when people ask me, well, why do I come to this as opposed to any other meditation group or retreat or something, I say it's experimental. It's a kind of freedom. I feel like this is there's no dogma here. People speak from their own experience. There's no like this is the way it is here. There's no and that sings to me. That validates something real inside of me. So it gives me the strength to believe that oh yeah, okay, this is legitimate. I can be whatever I need to be in my meditation practice. I thank you for that.
I would add on for myself anyways, that I buy into that this is like a solution. You know, maybe there's other solutions, but I really do believe that this kind of effort is needed in the world. And in fact, the world's crashing around us, and you know, this needs to be growing quickly, sooner rather than later. So I think from, you know, I like, even though it's a small part of my life, it's living in the solution, or at least participating in it somewhat, a little bit. So.
And I just have to add to that the combination of the responsibility and the awakening is unique, I think, here. That it's really not just, it's out there. You speak of it directly. And that I find very fulfilling and just right. It feels right to me.
Being in Lowell for just 2 months, it feels like that I was dropped in an ecosystem that like gave me nourishment that I needed, that I had to have. I don't know what I would be without it now, and so it's easy to feel selfishly that it was worth it. Yeah. And I also have this feeling of like, oh, like we're still making it worth it. Like I still have this, like pushes me to like, oh, am I making it worth it? Like what am I, is it gonna stop here and I'm just gonna like bask in my own like, you know, happy bubble, or, you know, what more is there to be done?
You know, your question brings up a certain sort of curiosity from my point of view, because in a way something like this is sort of a condensed version of what's being done. And I grew up in a community, and often there was a question for a lot of us over time, is this worth it? And all the people I've known who've asked that question have answered it different ways, many times different ways at different times. And sometimes with a lot of frustration going out of something, feeling, oh, this really wasn't worth it. And so it's just interesting to think about this from like an external perspective, because that's where I go to the point of, well, I'm not quite doing it. But in that sort of hardcore way, at least, I am doing it to a degree. So I'm just sort of curious, you know, like I think some of it comes to really the question, what do you want out of it? Like what fundamentally makes the decision whether it was worth it real for one? So just a reflection on it. And keep in mind that I'm here because in some ways I did not think it was worth it to be there, you know, so that's still a decision too.
I think about doubt and faith, and a name that doubt has, or one of its weapons, is this phrase that I've heard: don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And it upsets me because it makes sense, but I hate it because it just destroys all my efforts. And I heard someone else say, no effort is wasted. And, you know, that's really empowering. And I heard someone else say, the bestness is a bigness. And so, keep doing it regardless. I don't think the answer matters. A question I would ask is anything not worth
Is there anything not worth doing?
I just wanted to add that at this stage in life, I am looking at things that I invested in, and I'm ready to look at them differently. Let go of the accoutrements of the objects of representation of those efforts in a way, in a symbolic way to question everything. So we can celebrate, yes, that this is worth it, because it is you see the result now that you wouldn't have seen then. But at the same time, there's a value in non-attachment, in the process as well as the eventual experience that I'm recognizing now. It's like things that seem so important are like just dissolving. What do you do with that? It's interesting. And to take that mindset during the process of investing from the beginning is important.
Soryu, when you said something about taking off on a bicycle and maybe getting hit by a truck, I can't help but I fell in love with this guy. His name was Ken Fight. I met him at my college campus. He was a guy who was a Catholic priest, and he had to quit for some reason. And he became what he called the itinerant fool. He would travel from campus to campus or wherever people wanted to see an itinerant fool. And he would do these funny Eucharistic kind of ceremonies. Two of them I remember very well. One was the no-string guitar. He would play a little hymn, then he would take a string off. Then when we play it again, take a string off. And eventually, it was silence. And then he had another thing where he did with one kernel of popcorn, and I think a lighter or something, and a little metal cup, little thing, and he popped the popcorn and did a mass with it. And then he passed it around, and everybody had to take not too much. And he's in the Paul Winter album, that is the one with all the animals, the whales, he's written in there because they were friends. Because Ken, the way he got to all of his programs was hitchhiking.
Wow.
And he was out hitchhiking one day, and large Marge came by and took him.
Jesus.
A big truck, a Mack truck, he got hit by it. I notice you're trying to build community and then trying to escape. Take off, or you want to be able to leave and have it still survive without you. Is that right?
No, that's right, but continue.
I'm just, the worth it question and the doubt about is it worth it or not, and For me, it reminds me of, I struggled to embrace Christianity and I couldn't, it was hard. I didn't struggle too hard, but it was hard to find Jesus laughing. I couldn't find any place in the Gospels where I actually found his humor. Little hints of it when he was making fun of Pharisees with children or something. But there was always an edge of teaching and stupidity around him that seemed to not get to the joke level or the humor level. And I struggled with that and tried to find humor in Christianity. Couldn't find it until I read one of these Essene or Dead Sea Scrolls. I think it was the Gospel of the Doubting Thomas. And the story in this gospel is that he was there at the crucifixion and he saw the bloody Jesus, and then he saw in an epiphany, in a vision, Jesus literally laughing his ass off because his body's bloody and he's laughing. And that was the long winding journey of ethics and epistemology and everything, and somehow the doubting that he has to put his hand in his side, he has to find, is there a master that can really master this? And the humor put the icing on the cake, and I'll remember your smile no matter what. It's in your eyes, it's in your face, it's in you. And you shared that with everyone here with a good serious punchline or two. And I think I've gotten a few good jokes in every time I hear you speak. So, thank you.
Is that what you want?
What I want? Is what I want?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Well, the hard work, the giving up of lives for this community is worth it if it creates a culture that is the basis of a new society that doesn't destroy life on Earth. That would make it worth it. And so we're doing it for that reason. And it's worth it if in this community, one person loves just one person. That would also make it worth it. first one is somewhat easier than the second one, but I think we can do both. I think we can do it. And the thing that makes it worth it to me is seeing those things happening, watching that happen. The way both of those things happen is that we fully acknowledge, honor, respect, but do not live by what we want. So, I'm not sure what I want. Not sure. That the work to get what I want, that has not been worth it in my life. I haven't found that that's gotten very far. So, we have the chance to practice a path that allows us to go beyond what we want and find what is actually happening. And so, it's a significant question. Is this community happening? Is this community actually happening? It's an important question. For a time, as we practice this evening, make an investigation into what's happening. What is happening right now? Investigate that. What is happening right now? What is happening? What is happening? For most of us, it's difficult to answer that question because we try to answer it by thinking about it. We think about what's happening without noticing that when we're thinking about what's happening is that we're thinking. So if you're thinking about what's happening, then that's fine. Just know that then the answer is you're thinking. That's what's happening. And it's okay if that's the only answer you get for this entire period. Just know then that the only answer you got was thinking. If it happens that you stop thinking and directly investigate what's happening, then you might find something deeper. What is happening? Continue to investigate what's happening. What is happening? Again, if you're thinking about this, if you're coming up with explanations of what's happening in your mind, then that's fine. Feel free to do that. Just know that that's what's happening. That's all. Just be aware that's what's happening. If you want a tip, a way that you can more fully investigate what's happening, try setting aside what you wish were happening. Try setting aside what you want. Continue to investigate what's happening, perhaps by setting aside what you want. Setting aside what you want to be experiencing in order to investigate what is happening. continue to investigate what's happening. Perhaps by setting aside what you want. And be clear about it. Okay, so this is what's happening. This is the thing that's happening. And I ask you, is it worth it? This thing that's happening. Is it worth it? If so, then throw yourself into it. If it's worth it, then throw yourself into it. If it's not worth it, then completely abandon it. Whatever it is that's happening, whatever that is that's happening, is it worth it? If so, throw yourself in, right now. If not, then abandon it right now. Don't participate in that anymore. Unless it's worth it, in which case participate completely. Please continue to ask what's happening. What is actually happening? Right now, what is happening? I'd recommend investigating that by setting aside what you want. And then ask, is it worth it? What is happening? Is it worth it? If so, throw yourself in. If not, abandon it. Be very clear about if your answer is a thought, in which case, that's thinking. So what's happening is thinking. And you can ask, is thinking worth it? But don't be confused between your thought and what you're thinking about. The thought is thinking. The thing you're thinking about is not thinking. It's not the same thing. If you ask, is it worth it? And you're asking, is it worth it to think about it? Only by directly experiencing it can you ask if that very thing is worth it. Not by thinking about it. Please continue to ask this question. What is happening? Again, if your answer comes as any kind of thought, then that's fine, but the answer is you're thinking. That's what's happening. And then ask, is it worth it to do this, whatever it is? If so, be conclusive about that. Make a commitment. Throw yourself into that completely. If it's not worth it, then abandon it. Make a commitment. Stop doing that. Stop participating completely. Either way, it's a joyful moment. You're either doing what's worth doing, or you're not doing what's not worth doing. Either way, it's a good life. So you'll know that you're doing the exercise because each minute you'll be happier than the last. Thank you for participating in that exercise. I know that it is a high challenge level. It's a difficult exercise to do. I recommend doing it though. I recommend it to most everyone because for most of us, we decide if something's worth it according to whether it gives us what we want. We make decisions by thinking up things we could do, imagining those possible futures, and then paying attention to whether that image in our minds makes our bodies feel good. And if it does, then we do that thing. And then after we've done that thing, we discover that the actual thing that happened doesn't make our bodies feel so good because the thing that actually happens is never what we wanted. And then we feel annoyed. We feel like there's something wrong with the world. The world made a mistake again. It failed to give me what I want. And so I bring this up because of a few conversations I had earlier today. A few different conversations. If we're deciding if something's worth it or not, depending on whether it gave us what we wanted, then nothing is worth it. So abandon that. Don't do it. Don't do it. It won't be worth it in the end. You won't get what you want. It will not give you what you want. It doesn't matter what it is. It's not because of the specific situation. Yes, it's true, your job doesn't give you what you want, your partner doesn't give you what you want, and you don't give you what you want. That's just because you all have that nature. None of you were made in order to give you what you want. That's not our purpose. My purpose is not to give you what you want. Your purpose is not to give me what I want. That's just not what it is. You can argue with that, but you'll lose that argument. So, so we consider if something's worth it or not. We can set aside the question of whether it's giving us what we want. And then we're still left with the question of whether it's worth it. We're still left with that question. And it's an important question, and too many people don't ask it, and they just go along with something that's not worth it for their lives and then die. This is common. So there should be a sense of urgency, and it's, let me be clear, this is common, and it's not a good idea. I don't recommend that. I do not recommend that. It's a real thing that can really happen, and I don't recommend it. What's not worth it is dying with regret. That's not worth it. And so we have to have some way to determine, okay, how to live a life that I'm not going to regret. It's not by figuring out some way to get what you want. So what is it? To answer that question, we have to dive into and actually look into what is actually happening. What is the thing that we're doing? What is the thing that's actually happening? What is that? What is happening? What is this thing that we're participating in? What are we doing? That has to be seen very clearly, or else the question can't be answered. So that's why I asked you to do that exercise, and I appreciate your determination, your work in that. I know it's a bit of a confusing exercise. It's hard to know what it's all about. But it's an important question for us to become increasingly skilled at answering. So we still have about half an hour for any questions, comments, answers, and such. So the time is yours. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had, when I was doing that exercise, I kept asking myself the question, and then I had like a connection with just the fact that I'm living and breathing and alive, you know, I'm here.
Is it worth it?
It was, I felt alive, really alive. You know, and the reality is that I walk around in a daze all day.
Is that worth it?
Well, you know, it's, yeah, it is. You know, I mean, I'm entitled to walk around in a daze. I don't have to be fully alive and present every moment of my life. It's okay to be in a daze. But I liked that connection that I had in that moment. It was, just like you said, it was joyful.
So that's available to you, right?
Yeah, it is.
And yet it's still worth walking around in a daze?
Well, I don't want to be too hard on myself, you know, so.
So now you're being hard on yourself? Yes?
If I say that is it worth it walking around, if I'm okay with walking around in a daze, that's kind of being hard on myself, I think, yeah. Right.
So is it worth it?
I'd rather not walk around in a daze all day. Yeah.
Is it worth it to be hard on yourself?
It's worth it to be honest with yourself, yeah.
Is it worth it to be hard on yourself?
It can be, yeah, actually, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right now you're being hard on yourself?
Yeah.
Okay, is that worth it?
Yeah.
Good. And so from that perspective, is it worth it to walk around in a daze? Is that worthy of your precious life?
It isn't. I want more for myself, yeah.
And is it worth it to then be vibrant and alive and breathing in the way that you said?
That is amazing, and that is what I want.
And is it worth it?
Absolutely.
Very good. This is a good example of what it is to carefully examine what is happening. To actually examine what is happening, not just what we think is happening. You can examine that too, but just know that if you're examining what you think is happening, then what's happening is that you're examining what you think. That's what's happening. You're not investigating what's happening, you're investigating what you think, which is fine as long as you know that. You have to be very clear about that.
Does thought have a conclusion?
Does thought have a conclusion? Death.
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 Can that come before physical death?
Well, it always comes before physical death. Thought dies. Every thought dies.
And is born again?
The same thought is not born again, no.
Different.
Thoughts die, and that's their destination. That's where they go.
And what do they die into?
Well, there's no way to talk about that. I don't even know if that's a valid assumption. Yes, because that's still that's the next thought. Yes, the thought about what they die into is the next thought. That is fine. It's come up and then it dies.
Okay. Last week I shared that for me, because I was caught by the disease of thinking, and it ruined my life. But then I got to a place where I got some insight into thankfulness about that. So I started thanking instead of thinking. And when thoughts would come up, I would say, Dankeschön, danken. And now I'm thinking. I'm thinking the end of thought. And one of my leaders in phenomenology was this guy, Martin Heidegger. And he was very clear about what is the goal of thinking or philosophy at the end of metaphysics, which is all kind of analysis of how the physics is connected. So it was beautiful to see this whole movement within the most intellectual ivory tower that was saying we are no longer going to project our thought about something and try to experiment and get to the scientific method. We're going to let everything speak for itself, whatever it is. and just practice listening, observing, mindfulness in other words, as I took it. And that the result of mindfulness is one thing, that you get clear about thinking and you see it's only what you said, accepting and rejecting. Nothing more is the mind capable of. And that we are not our minds, so being mindful, practicing mindfulness is a joke. But until you stop thinking, you can't get the joke. And you can't stop thinking until somebody with the joke in their heart can tweak you a little out of the, well, this is a very high challenge. Reject anything that is mixed bag if it's not totally satisfying me. I have to reject it wholesale. I can try, but lots of people think I tried, I made determination, then, like this gentleman said, I have to make it again and again. Or like John Mill said, every day pick up the cross. Thanks. I don't know where to go from there.
Sorry, you kept saying, is it worth it? Is it worth it? And then you said, is it worth your precious, giving your precious life to it? Which I think is a different question. You could say, is it worth it for humanity, for, blah, blah, blah. But is it worth giving your precious life to it? Is it a different question?
How is it a different question?
I don't know that I want to answer. I just want to invite people to ask that question instead of, is it worth it? Like, is it worth giving your precious life to this now, at this?
I was thinking of this "is it worth it" thing in the meditation, and I mean, as I went along, a couple things sort of emerged. One is, there's the sort of dichotomy that you're sort of proposing between observation, I guess, and thought. And the thing that captured my attention most is a sort of pain that seems to be emanating from my shoulder blade. And so I paid attention to that, and then along with that there was thoughts that came up too. But I saw them as different things. And so I started paying attention to that and started, well, is it worth it? And
Is it worth it to feel the pain?
well, is it worth it to be creating the pain, in a sense? Or, in some sense that's me creating the pain, or to having the pain. But then the question was, ultimately, as you're sort of alluding to, well, then if I say, no, this isn't worth it, I'm going to give it up, what exactly am I doing in response? Like, what is my choice to give up in this context exactly? Is it giving up the ability to experience a protective signal? Is it giving up the actual production of the inflammation or whatever? Is it giving up? And can I make that choice? And if so, how do I make that choice? And then anything that I could do towards that direction, then I started asking, well, is it worth it? So that just seemed to me like maybe in some ways possibly a good example of what the exercise really comes up with almost anything, truly. It's like, you know, being here, is it worth it? Well, what are my choices? And so it's ultimately a comparative choice about like something. And it's always to a hypothetical, it's always to an unknown.
Well, I understand it's a difficult exercise, and maybe there are better ways of teaching it, better ways of talking about it, but it's not really as complicated as I'm hearing everyone talk about it. I'm hearing a lot of complexity here. And it's just not that complicated. This is your life, and it's about to be over, and are you glad about what you did? You're participating in the creation of this world, and how's that going? These aren't really very complicated philosophical questions. They're actually quite straightforward. I think we often make them philosophical, partially because that's fun and partially because we don't want to ask the question, but it doesn't seem all that complicated. The challenge of the exercise is to really ask these questions, to be sure that we don't die with regret, to be sure that we're making good use of our lives, and to be sure that we are increasingly happy and at peace. This isn't very complicated, and what's difficult in life is that we often come to this point. We actually really do come to this point of needing to ask, is it worth it? Is this thing I'm doing worth it? And at that time, if we're accustomed to looking at these questions in philosophical, complicated ways, then it's going to be a hard road at that time. It's going to be rough. Because we're not going to have a way to answer those questions, but we're still going to be in a situation. So I don't know that it's really that complicated. I don't know how to make it more simple than I already made it. Let me make that more simple. Any ideas? Yeah.
I had a thought in relation to what you just said, because I had a similar thing. I was really uncomfortable in this chair, and you said, was it worth it? Is it worth it? And I was like, no, it's not. I'm going to get more comfortable. But when you said it's a comparison, I think my thought about that is, for me, it's not. It's like if I abandon something, I don't always know what I'm comparing it against. I'm just comparing it against not doing that anymore. And in itself, in abandoning that, the new options come to light. But I think in the moment I abandon something, it doesn't mean I have a clue what's going to replace it. I just know that that thing I'm doing is done.
Now,
I can't do it anymore.
So again, this is very complicated, in my view. How did you know that you should, that it wasn't worth it?
To sit uncomfortably,
Yeah,
to continue to...
How did you know that? That doesn't seem obvious at all.
It was just obvious to me. It's just not worth it.
Well, sure, but that's been obvious to me many times when I didn't move and it turned out I was wrong.
Well,
So.
well, because I mean, if I felt like there was a benefit to,
Oh, so
maybe if I had been in a situation where we were really looking at the sitting position and staying with the pain, and
were you in
there's
that
some
position?
benefit, but in this moment I didn't feel like that's what I was doing.
So your feelings are the final authority of what makes things worth it?
Being here felt worth it, but sitting in that position didn't feel worth it.
But why?
But you said this was supposed to be simple, right?
It's very simple. Much more simple than human feelings. Human feelings are
That
complicated.
seems simple to me, but you're saying it was based on
Human feelings are one of the most complicated things on earth. Human feelings are complicated. You can feel this way and then you feel that way. then you feel this other way again. That's complicated. It's not, so then what happened was, you were sitting there and you asked, what's happening, right? And what was happening was, I am valuing my feelings above everything else. Right? I am currently basing my life on my feelings. That's what's happening. And then you can ask, is it worth it? Now I know it can easily get philosophical, but I have confidence in all of you that you can handle that you can really ask, because it's your real life that really matters. That you're
Is
asking
the way
about.
I feel that important? Is the way I feel, you're saying that I'm asking, is it worth basing my decision right now on how I feel?
Yeah, is a life based on human feelings worth it?
Well, I'd say no, but in that moment, there didn't seem to be any reason not to move.
So is living a life based on whether you can think of a reason not to do something worth it?
Other people do.
You said this is going to be simple.
The thing is that I'm pretty sure that the answer to my question is simple. And then we're just making it complicated because we prefer to not have that answer.
So, okay, why don't you give me the answer if it was you that was uncomfortable?
It's often me who's uncomfortable. Right? And that just turns out to not be a very good way of making decisions. How I feel turns out to be not a trustworthy way to live a life.
Not very many.
So it can be simpler than that. There is something simpler than making yourself feel how you want to feel. There's something much simpler than making yourself feel how you want to feel.
Okay. And that is, well, in that particular instance though, was there something beneficial to staying in that position?
To not participate in something that's not worth it. Namely, living a life just based on trying to get ourselves to feel how we want to feel.
Okay, that may be the big picture in that microsecond of deciding whether to move or not. Somehow my brain doesn't get that.
Well, yeah, of course. Which is why we have the practice, so that you can know that that's, see, the point here is, you say your brain doesn't get it, but the thing that means is that the philosophy can't reach that level of decision making. And that's why we have this practice. That's why I have this community. You have a practice like this so that you can sit there and be uncomfortable and want to move. And then you have lots of philosophy. But blah, blah, blah. And by the time you've said it, you've already moved. Because the philosophy doesn't matter to a question like that. That's a real question, finally. Finally, we're talking about something real. The same thing as you're in a community like this and you don't like it. People aren't the way you want them to be. Right? And then what? What happens next? What happens then? Yes? Does that make sense? So there's something simpler than whether you can get your body to feel comfortable and whether you can get other people to be the way you think they should be. There's something simpler than that. Did you have your hand up? Or is it back down again?
Part of it doesn't all have a hand up.
It's up now.
It's not up. It doesn't have to be up. I'm not pressuring you.
I guess I just feel moved to say that what I was getting all in my head, actually, you were asking us kind of not, I was getting the impression you're asking us not to be.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all it kept doing, but then I just got this really amazing sensation, which then all went to the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw a navigation system in the heart, and I realized it's not about me, it's just navigating through the heart, which actually includes everything. So what is this thing about our, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not about me.
Mm.
And,
So
and
what's-
if I'm there in the heart, it's not about just me.
Mhm.
And that the mind was just making a big mess and way too complicated.
Mm. And so living your life from that mind, is that worth it? Would you like to live that way?
From that heart or that.
Your mind, your thinking, is that a
No, I
good way
want
to
to
live?
live through the heart, I want to navigate through the heart.
Yeah, very good. So it's good that you have clarity.
Yeah, I got clarity from that.
Mhm.
I mean, I think I already knew that, but it became,
Well, maybe you knew it, but that's just the same mental mess.
yeah.
The question is, do you live it? And so we do this exercise so that you can live it. We know a lot of things, right?
That's what makes it worth living, if I can live from that place.
Mm.
That's my, I mean, that's the,
That makes it worth it.
that makes it worth living.
Very good.
That's my navigation.
I'm glad that you found that clarity today. And it's okay if sometime next year it turns out that even that's not worth it. There might be some other place, even deeper, more profound. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
But, absolutely, you have that clarity. Now the challenge is living it. That's the challenge. So we come to something like this from 5 to 7 in order to gain that clarity. And then we leave at 7 o'clock in order to live that clarity.
Well, and I've had that clarity before and it's been forgotten,
Mm. So don't,
taken, whatever.
well, be very clear about it now. If you have that clarity, truly have that clarity. Only when we gain clarity like this, if we don't live by it, we don't get the next clarity. We just get the same one again a few years later. Does that make sense? So, live it now. That's the challenge. You can do that, of course. You can do that. We have about 5 more minutes. Probably time for one more comment. And then I'll finish with something. Mhm.
I think, I mean, to my perspective, and it's just the opposite of the left brain detailed person you know,
Mhm.
you kind of answered your question in your own talk, I don't know, a while ago, half an hour ago, saying, is the life you're living or the choices you're making, be they big or small, something you're going to regret on your deathbed?
Mhm.
However you want to put that. And it's the long view of how you've lived your life and how every element of it, you're aiming for. In the same way I kind of answered, has CML been worth it? Well, I mean,
Right.
it's been the long view of everybody working together with a
Mhm.
productive, positive approach.
Mhm.
And I think you and I even touched on it when I talked with you in January.
Yeah.
Has my life, how have I constructed my life? And, it's always, well, I suppose ultimately am I gonna regret my life or big chunks of it on my deathbed, as it were? But am I just mindful enough of, the long view and, doing the right thing and, keeping everything in balance and harmony?
Yeah, I think that there are 2 aspects of this deathbed view. One aspect is that it's the quote long view, as you say. And so that's important. It's good for us to look at things in the long view. Very important, actually. Longer even than one lifetime. That is important. But there's actually another element of the deathbed moment that I would like to emphasize as well. And that is that you have nothing at that moment. Try to understand what I mean by this. At that moment, you have nothing to lose by accepting the truth.
Right.
Now, I know you do to a certain extent because you don't want to regret it, so you lie to yourself. You say, oh no, I'm really glad I did all that stuff. but it's less compelling at that moment. At this moment, if you have to accept that you don't really like how you've lived, then you have to make changes. It's going to be work. But at that moment, you can't make changes. It's over. There's no work. And so you have an incentive, more of an incentive to tell the truth. And what I'm asking us to do is to remain in that state of mind, to know it's time. It's worth it to ask this question and make the changes. Don't wait until you can't make the changes. Realize this when you still can make the changes. Realize that there have been certain things that you've been participating in, creating, involved in, that weren't worth it, and then shift that while you can. So yes, for now you could say that there's something to lose, but it's worth losing it. It's worth paying that price. Whatever that price may be, it's still worth it. So, these questions really matter. And I know that it's been a little confusing and maybe a little uncomfortable to look at this. There hasn't, a lot of the time I do Sunday sits and it feels upbeat and such. And I'm glad that we have Sunday sits that are upbeat. But I have, you could say, earned, through the story that I told, the right to, you don't, let me put it this way, I can give a talk like this, and then when I come back in a few months, you'll still come to my next talk. So, let's face it, not everyone here has achieved that, authority from their own years of sacrifice. And so I'm putting you in this difficult position, really, really confusing position, where there aren't clear answers, where I didn't say, okay, good news, here's the clear answer. Yeah, don't regret on your deathbed. Good luck with that. So you have to have some kind of investigation happening right now because it hasn't been so clear. And then please struggle with that. Please struggle with that for the next few months. I'd like to come back and hear what clarity has come through that struggle. Because the struggle is worth it. The struggle as a community is worth it. Have that struggle, have the courage, have the strength, have the love to struggle with these questions together without wanting an answer delivered somewhere near 7 o'clock from a question that was asked somewhere around 5 o'clock. Study it, look at it, ask, wonder, and risk your life for it. Because your life is at risk. If you don't have the clear answer to these questions in your life, then you are risking your life. You're risking your life.
Yes.
If you have this clarity and then you don't live by it.
Yeah.
So don't do that. In other words, risk your life. It's worth it. I know, it's a hard question. It doesn't have an easy answer. You're not sure what the question is. You don't know why it's asked at all. It's very awful. Well, fine. Yes. Eat that. Take it. Face it. Go with that. It's a lot better than this non-committal complacency that has taken over our culture, our world. Don't let yourself sort of, well, I don't know if it's worth it, maybe it's worth it, I'd hopefully figure it out tomorrow. Really ask these questions, really make changes, and really do that together. So, when other people are giving these talks, providing you with ways of investigating, know that this matters, that this is about your life. These are about questions that you don't have the answers to, and that probably aren't going to get answered because you come on Sunday and somebody says something clever sometime around 7 o'clock. Instead of that, really throw yourself in to the desperation, to the confusion, to the insecurity. Throw yourself into that. Allow that to happen, because that struggle, that question, that investigation, that sacrifice, that risk is worth it.
It might be possible that we can make mistakes, and that's okay, that we can do something that's not worth it, that ends up being worth it, that we did something that wasn't worth it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm learning.
Mm-hmm.
So that there's no answer, really.
I don't
You
know
can-
that I say there's no answer.
You can make give
No,
yourself an
yeah,
answer.
you can take over. I don't know about that though. There's an answer. There is an answer, which we don't make up. What we don't make up is